to let everyone know, we are recording this webinar. Because this is the first in a series of 6, we're hoping that some people might be able to join next week or in later weeks that haven't been able to go to the first ones. So this will be recorded. A link will be shared so that people can watch it and listen in. So hopefully everybody's okay with that. Now, it's great that we've got some people we know on this call. There's definitely some people we don't know. So we've all been reaching out through our networks to invite people to try to bring people along to this webinar. The purpose of the webinar is to engage the widest possible range of Indian and UK researchers and people interested in the environment, environmental actors, NGOs and others, so that we can explore the potential for greater connection between citizen science and water quality related research. We have all been working in different parts of that sphere for a couple of years, and we're quite passionate about it. We think there's a lot more opportunity, and we want to build some new collaborations. So for the first webinar, we've restricted attendance to participants from India, but in future webinars, we'll be opening up for more UK researchers to join as well. So as this introductory slide shows there with the 4 logos, this is being delivered by the University of Warwick. My colleague will introduce themselves in a minute. Thames 21, ALP Synergy Ltd, and all being done in partnership with Earth 5R, which is based in Mumbai. So I will move on to the next slide. So in terms of our introductions, so we have, this is our team. Most of us are on this call here, some of us aren't. My colleague Leslie Parsons is going to very briefly introduce herself in 30 seconds. She's just trying to shut up the puppy. Apologies for that. So I'm Ant Parsons. I'm the first one in the picture of 4 there. So I'm a director of ALP Synergy Ltd. That photo was taken last September in Mumbai on the River Mitti, where we were out doing some catchment investigations. My colleague Leslie.
Good morning, Leslie Parsons, again, Director of ALP Synergy, which is a small consultancy working with Ant. I have over 30 years experience in water quality, working for the Environment Agency, and look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you. Natalie, I think you were going to introduce John.
Yes, hello everyone. My colleague John will be with us in a later presentation. He's the head of Improving Rivers at Thames 21, and Thames 21 is a waterways charity based in London with a big focus on improving rivers by connecting their local communities with the rivers.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Cook. I'm from the University of Warwick and I'm an environmental scientist. My research focuses mainly on water quality and also emerging environmental contaminants. And as part of this, I'm looking to build citizen science capacity into my research.
And I'm Dr. Natalie Gilbert. I'm the Evidence Programme Manager for Thames 21, and evidence underpins all of our river restoration work, ranging from very high-tech science approaches to very, very simple observations, all of which involve the local community, and we'll be talking about that a bit later on.
Hi everybody, I'm Paula Nixon. I'm a senior consultant to ALP Synergy and I have 25 years more experience in environmental science, environmental regulation and innovation.
Fantastic, thank you. And you'll see there some of our colleagues from Earth 5R. Now, I don't believe any of our colleagues were able to join us this morning or this afternoon for you. They're heavily involved in some of the COVID-19 response work and the educational work. So today, as they don't necessarily have speaking parts, this is an introduction, they're going to focus on that, but they'll be playing a greater role in the later webinars, and particularly next week. So that's the introductions. We're a group of activists, researchers. We've known each other for a few years. We're all keen to work together, but you know, we're keen to get to know you as well and to bring you into potential collaborations. So before I move on, I'm going to do a little poll then. So it'd be really nice to find out a little bit more about you. Let me switch on the technology. So there's a little poll coming up. Hopefully you should be all be able to see it very shortly. Right, that's launched. So you should be able to see a poll now, a little questionnaire. There are 6 questions. It would be wonderful if you could try to answer it. Sometimes it doesn't let you answer straight away, but you won't be able to submit the poll unless you answer all 6 questions. So please have a go. Can I just check from one of my fellow panelists? Can you see the poll?
Yeah.
Excellent, good. Please go ahead and complete it. %50 completed. I'll share the results when they're on and everybody can see. Just waiting on the last one to complete. Okay, one person hasn't quite finished. There we go, fantastic. So 8 people have now voted. Let me end that and let me share the results. So hopefully you can see the results here. So the first question, trying to explore, whether you're a researcher or not. So 5 people on here are researchers, 3 aren't. That's a nice mix. Are you a citizen scientist? So it's great that 2 people already would declare themselves as citizen scientists. 6 wouldn't. Are you or do you want to be a change maker? So 7 people have said yes. 1 has said, what is a change maker? Paula, what's a change maker in your view?
Well, thanks for prompting me on this, because a change maker was something that I added. So I actually looked it up on Google, and the quote that I will use is that a change maker is an individual who is committed to advancing the common good, wherever that might be, at a local level, a regional level, an international level, and it can be from any sector. They summarise it as anybody working in the social good space, and we would include environmental good in the definition of social good.
Fantastic. So I think we're probably all change makers then. Question 4, have you used citizen science in research? Yes, 3 people. Well, that's great to hear. We're very conscious that there's a lot of us talking in this first webinar, but we really do want to hear from yourselves and share experience. And just a little story. So one of Sarah's colleagues, who's partly been involved in this work, he's been involved in some of the preparations, and he's almost our target. If we can really get him on board with citizen science, we know then that we've got citizen science and research connected, because he's a hard engineer, and he thinks citizen science is the stuff that governments do for citizens. So we've got some work to do. Question 5, have you seen citizen science have real impact? Well, everybody said yes, so that's fantastic. We'd love to hear those stories. And how much do you feel you know about citizen science already? So 1 person says nothing, 5 say a little, 3 say quite a bit. So that's great. There's definitely a good group of people here for us to be sharing. So I will stop sharing that and I will get on with the rest of the show. So just to let you know, Leslie is keeping an eye on the chat. So if you have any problems or any questions, Leslie will see that. But some other housekeeping things. Has your view changed? No, you've got seen the right thing. Yeah. So we are recording this webinar, as I mentioned. As this is a webinar, you're all muted for now. Although, as we saw, I was able to allow Samita to speak. So if anyone's desperate later on, we can do that. We do want to engage you all through the chat function. As I said, you should be able to see the panelists, but if you've managed to work that through, we can move on. And we are having a discussion session at the end. So if you've got questions that come up, please do add them to the chat throughout, and we'll come back to them at the end. And as I've tried to put across already, we are looking for others to participate as panelists and share content in future webinars. Shortly, I'll show you a list of the other webinars, but we can come back to that shortly. So, bit of background about our project then. I've mentioned that we've been working together for a little while. I've shown a photo of a number of us in Mumbai last September. These webinars really are happening because of the COVID-19 lockdown and the restrictions that are in place. We were planning to be working with Earth 5R. Sarab and his colleagues should have been in London this week, carrying out some citizen science work on the River Thames. And in a couple of weeks, the team were coming to Pune in India to look at the Mula-Muta River. All of that has had to be delayed, but we didn't want to lose our passion and ambition. So we decided to create a series of webinars to grow the connections and build things beforehand. So as it says on the slide there's a series of webinars that are being used now to gain insight and grow networks. There will be twin field investigations whenever the world opens up again. We'll be towards the front of the list for people to be traveling. And we're looking to network and build new research and impact collaborations wherever possible. So now there isn't a big pot of money for this at the moment. What we're hoping to do is to build collaborations that can bid for money in the future. Those 2 field investigations are funded, and if others on the call or from future webinars want to join, then there is a potential for people to join those twin field investigations, but they would have to be self-funded from your organisation or elsewhere. So there may be some questions on that later on, but I will move on for now. So the reason we're all here, citizen science. And I gave a little story there of one of Sarah's colleagues. I think there are many definitions of citizen science. This is the one that we use, that it's the participation of amateur volunteers in scientific research. Now, that scientific research might be at a very simple step level, or it might be at a very complicated level, and we'll explore that shortly. But what's definitely true is that over the last 5+ years, there has been a huge increase in uptake globally in citizen science and people getting involved. And there's some great examples across the world. So the images there, the left and right images are in London-based rivers. So at one end, we have children getting involved. At the other end, you can see just by the personal protective equipment that the people are wearing that it's probably a lot more technical. But it could be as simple as taking photos and being engaged out in the communities wherever people are. So, as I say, curious, concerned communities, they're very willing and very able to collect data, and we want to help that to feed into research more. So the series of webinars, we're on webinar 1 now, the Introduction to Citizen Science and Water Quality. They're going to be every Thursday almost for the next 6 weeks, although we're skipping 1 week in the middle. So the 7th of May, we'll be talking about the value of citizen science in research. So my colleagues Sarah and Natalie will be going into more detail. Webinar 3, the value of river research and citizen science to businesses. We're there trying to think, well, actually, there's a lot of businesses that are getting more engaged in the environment, and we want to bring research and citizen science to their door and help them to think about that. And you can see then we have we skip a week, and then we carry on from the 28th of May. Now, these titles at the moment, we have some of the content for these webinars, but what we're hoping is to work with people on this call, other colleagues, and actually co-create the content here so that we can all share our experience. So if you've got ideas of how to contribute to some of those webinars, or if you think that there is another topic we should be covering that links to citizen science and water and research, then please do put that forward. Webinar 6 there, you'll see is an idea building workshop. So we really do want to use these webinars as a platform for us to build new collaborations. Those who are from a research world will probably have heard of some of the funding streams that are available in the UK that can be mirrored in India. There is an India-UK water centre that jointly funds research. There are Global Challenges Research Fund opportunities that come out that would support partnerships between the UK and India. There are Newton Fund projects that could be done. So we want to use that final webinar for building ideas and collaborations where we could then, in the future, bid for money and fund more citizen science and research. Okay. So I'm going to show a little video now. We're hoping that the sound will come through okay. If your connection isn't brilliant, then the sound might break up a little bit, but the image seems to work okay. It's only 45 seconds long, and this is a video we created this time last year. This time last year to promote a workshop that we were running in the UK, where we had 20 Indian delegates coming and joining. So I'll let you watch the video and then we'll discuss it a little bit.
The composition of the liquid has changed. It doesn't have any properties of water left. यमुना जी का स्नान करने से तो जब लोग जाते ही नहीं है। Cleaning is very important. The birds have a feeling on the kitchen. The birds have a lot of power. But at least the water crime.
Okay, so 45 seconds long, and we use that little video to highlight that there are some big challenges out there in the world of water. We're particularly passionate about water quality, but we're not excluding other challenges. We were also a little mischievous with that video, so if I go back to the start again and play.
The composition of the liquid has changed. It doesn't have any properties of water left.
So that's the first 15 seconds of the video. Up to that point, all of the imagery is from India. I'm going to press play again now. Everything you see from now on is in the UK, although because we left the Indian music over the top, could easily give the impression that it's in India. And I'm going to pause again there just to highlight that that is about 200 metres away from the Old Trafford football ground where Manchester United play. So, you know, some of these problems are very public. It's also right next to where the BBC have their studios. And that was taken 2 years ago. A couple of weeks later, we went back, it was clean. A couple of weeks later, we went back, it was there again. So the rest of this is now in the UK.
Cleaning is very important. The birds have a feeling on the kitchen. The birds have a lot of power. But at least the water crime.
So, as I said, we were using that. We've been a little bit mischievous, but what we're trying to point out is that we're trying to get away from this perception that the UK's rivers are all lovely and clean and that India has lots of problems. We know that we've got a lot of shared challenges. And what's been really interesting during this COVID-19 challenge is exploring some of the news articles. So we've seen online that apparently the Yamuna River, which was at the start of that video, is now cleaner than it's ever been. We don't know whether that's true. We don't know whether that's fake news, but just an interesting question for us to potentially explore. Are India's rivers cleaner than ever at the moment because of industry being less, less industry operating? And if they are, how would we capture that knowledge? And the same for the UK. What is happening in the UK at this time of lockdown? I don't want to do that again. Okay, so I mentioned that we're not just interested in water quality. Obviously, there are some challenges with water quantity as well. And top right-hand corner here, we can see an image from the 2018 Kerala floods where, clearly devastation. But in the UK, the image next to that, showing the buildings and the warehouses flooded, that was from the 2017 floods in Cumbria in England. But also this year, just as this COVID-19 crisis was kicking off, we had the wettest February on record, and there were major floods across the UK. The bottom left-hand corner there, which illustrates the Houses of Parliament and the River Thames flooded, is clearly not a real image. It's fake news. But it's really important to recognise that the only reason London does not flood is because there is a huge barrier across the River Thames at a strategic location. So if the Thames barrier were to fail or were to be overtopped, then that could be a real image for London. And then just some data and stats to back it up. The Niti Aayog report from the summer of 2018 highlighting that, there are some real challenges around water in India. And things may have improved, but there's probably still a lot to be dealt with. So these are wicked problems. All of these challenges, we describe them as wicked because they're difficult or impossible to solve. And they're difficult or impossible to solve because there's not necessarily all the knowledge out there that you need to solve that problem. So maybe there's a role for citizen science there. You need a wide range of stakeholders involved to be able to tackle some of these challenges. Again, citizen science could be the way to bring more stakeholders on board. There's a high economic burden, clearly from flooding, clearly from quality. If a river is polluted and it has to be treated before it can be used for other purposes, it's all increasing the cost. And all of these problems are interconnected. We've talked briefly about water quality and about flooding. There are strong connections between flooding with dirty water. There are connections between litter, increasing the risk of flooding. There are lots of interconnections between problems. All of these things make these wicked problems. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to my colleague so you get a fresh voice and some fresh views.
Hello again. Thinking about those wicked problems and the fact that several of us on this call know about citizen science and several of us don't, it would be useful, I think, to cover some of the opportunities that citizen science presents. It is and can be a resource with huge potential. Research projects often, for instance, don't have many field staff, but citizen scientists can vastly increase what we can see and understand in the field. That can help us fill knowledge gaps. And those people are often passionate and invested. So whilst we're increasing our environmental awareness from using citizen scientists, we also have the benefit of potentially being able to implement greater behavioural change through those passionate, invested participants. It can be a really cost-effective alternative to traditional monitoring. Public authorities who are tasked with monitoring often can't be everywhere at once. And there's an added benefit that it can attract corporate funding to do with corporate social responsibility and other forms of support from corporates. Can you change the slide, please, Ant? I thought it might be useful to illustrate some of the perspectives on how diverse the approaches to citizen science can be by using this 4-box matrix. And we've just taken a sample of environmental citizen science projects to illustrate increasing task complexity and increasing equipment complexity. So if you take, for instance, rainfall rescue, there was just a very, very simple task of digitising paper-based data. But if you go over to the bottom right and think about Safecast, Safecast was a citizen science intervention designed by a university with some digital makers, electronic makers, that meant that citizens in and around the Fukushima disaster, the nuclear disaster area in Japan, were able to build Geiger counters and analyse radiation distribution that proved that some misleading forecasts from government were completely incorrect. So it created a much safer way for people to adapt. Could you change the slide, please, Ant? We'll be covering some of the examples from the previous slide in future webinars, but this is one that I thought might be useful because it covers quite a lot of the elements of citizen science. It's a very famous case of Flint in Michigan in the United States. It's an example that began with citizen concern rather than from a research project, because people noticed they were becoming poisoned from their drinking water. The drinking water changed colour as well. So one particular concerned local person, Leanne Walters, decided to take action, and she approached the University of Virginia Tech to talk to them about how she could use citizen science to prove and identify the sources and nature of the pollution that was causing illness. She was also able to engage the regional Environmental Protection Agency after local enforcement and authorities were not engaging. And together they developed a citizen science project that used zip codes to implement a sampling system from many, many households. And what they were able to identify is up to twice the limit of hazardous waste lead concentration in water, some contamination from Legionella that led to some deaths. That resulted in a federal emergency being declared and the authorities taking it very seriously, and $600 million of relief. Another output of that particular experience was the federal government then improved the way they analysed water quality and sampled water quality from learning from this action. There was some controversy though. There was belief that some of the results were distorted by the citizens, and there were some business people who were trying to exploit citizens by selling them unqualified analytical devices for home use. So it's very important, isn't it, that citizen science is well designed and well implemented and that it fits and serves research needs. So I'm just going to hand over to Natalie now, who will tell you about how we can do that.
Hello again, everyone. So as the poll showed, some of you are already aware of the impact that citizen science projects can have for meaningful research. So some are very, very successful, but others really struggle to recruit volunteers and achieve the project goals. So the 10 principles of citizen science were developed. It was actually a wide international group of researchers and citizen science practitioners who developed these. And the idea is that they set out the key characteristics that all successful citizen science projects shared, in their opinion. They're deliberately flexible and adaptable to a wide range of projects across many disciplines, so not necessarily water. But some of these are very, very important, and we will consider these in more detail in a later webinar. But actively involving citizen scientists has to have generate new knowledge or new outcomes. It has to have outcomes that are meaningful for the citizen scientists as well as the researchers, involving people throughout the work as well. So they can be involved right from the start and right the way to the end, to the actual decision-making process. And this is certainly something that Thames 21 with our citizen science projects has discovered. It's a two-way process as well, so it's not just free labour, getting in volunteers to do work for you. You have to feed back to the citizen scientists, you have to help them develop, you have to support them in their data collection and analysis. So it's very much a two-way process. And these ideas have been set out as a guide for governments, for decision makers, also researchers and project leaders, to help them to set up a really robust and effective citizen science project, and also help people to understand how they work if for judging them, say for example for funding bids, and developing and assessing citizen science projects. Over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Natalie. So that's really, I mean, this is a webinar, so we were planning on not speaking for too long, but that's really just our little introduction to citizen science, and we wanted now to cover some questions. I will ask some of the questions of colleagues on the call, but it'd be great if attendees have got questions that they could put them in the chat, and then we'll try to cover them. So the first of these questions then, so Natalie, while you've been in the chair, you know, what benefits do you think citizen science really does bring or can bring?
So yeah, as I mentioned, we've got multiple citizen science projects running in the UK. Our partners Earth5R in India as well, I'm sure would agree that there's a huge amount of benefit that citizen science projects can bring. As we've said, research or agency staff can't be everywhere at once or at the right time to capture system dynamics. So actually involving local volunteers who are out there on the ground in data collection can have a huge impact in terms of the spatial and temporal scale of the data that can be collected. And this is really important in a time when budgets and cost cutting is very prevalent, and as a result of that, even the UK Environment Agency is now incorporating citizen scientists in their everyday monitoring of the environment, and particularly in sort of early warning systems. And there's lots of conversations going on at the moment in the UK and in Europe about how citizen scientists can be involved more in environmental monitoring. So as I said as well, it's really important to think that it's not just about data gathering. They can be involved throughout the project, so data processing or even blogging and media. So when you're thinking about how you can involve your local community, it doesn't just have to be going out and collecting data. There's many different ways that they can get involved. And then ultimately also putting pressure on local government or businesses to tackle pollution. So there's many, many aspects in which volunteers can get involved and be helpful. And what we found as well, and I'm sure everyone else who's had a bit of experience with citizen science as well knows that people can be extremely knowledgeable, either about their local area, so they can tell you about things that you didn't even know were happening in terms of pollution issues and problems, but also through their hobbies and through their professions, they bring a lot of different expertise to the table, which can be really interesting in helping with problem solving as the project develops. And ultimately as well for funding opportunities. So increasingly funders and businesses are looking for increasing involvement of local stakeholders and volunteers. So actually it can also be a route to get a project funded. Okay,
thanks Natalie. I'm going to jump back to one of Paula's slides here and ask you a related question. So this links in with, so Vanita has asked on the chat, how can we collaborate? And we have Earth5R in the middle of this slide. So obviously, as I said at the start, we're collaborating with Earth5R. They aren't in this call today, but probably worth, if we just explain briefly that without spoiling any of our future webinars, you know, what Earth5R were going to do in London and what we were thinking that we would be doing in Pune in India. So Natalie, what were Earth5R going to do in London as a collaboration?
Well, we really recognise, as you've seen from the video, that there are many shared challenges, and Earth5R are being really effective at engaging the communities in India. So what we wanted to do was to collaborate together along with all of the other panellists to create a citizen science toolkit that could be applied to both English challenges and European challenges, and also challenges in India. So very much a two-way conversation in what are our challenges, what are the range of kind of tools and opportunities for monitoring the environment available, and how can we create methodologies that are robust in creating evidence that can then be used to effect change in the catchments.
Okay, thanks. And so this twin field activity, we're going to, Sarab and colleagues are coming to London to help develop the toolkit, and then we were going to test the toolkit in Pune in India on the Moolamooter River, and then keep developing it and build on that. So it was seen very much as a start of collaborating, wasn't it, I think, Natalie?
Very much so, yes. And equally as well involving our citizen scientists in the UK as well. We've got many concerned citizens up and down the River Thames, so a great opportunity for Earth 5R also to speak to some of our volunteers. That we're going to take some video and compile it into some educational materials around shared challenges in both our countries.
Okay, so in answer to your question then, Vanita, there's definitely a more immediate opportunity, which is connecting in with the already planned activity, but we're all open to other collaborations. So please do make your suggestions, and we can build on that. And
I noticed Vanita's question went to all panelists rather than all panelists and attendees. So you have just answered the question that Vanita Prasad asked, which was how can we collaborate?
Yes. So if people are in the chat, if you can, the blue box probably says all panelists. That's the default setting. So if you click on the little drop down arrow, you can change it to all panelists and attendees, so that when you ask a question, everybody can see it. So the second question then, I don't want to drill you too hard, Natalie, but we've been talking about the positives of citizen science. There must be some risks and some negative sides to it.
Yep, certainly there is. We will touch on these in a bit more detail in a later webinar. But yes, although there can be some very, very positive outcomes for the community and for the environment, there are obviously also always some considerations that must be borne in mind as well. So first of all, for those of you getting excited about the army of people you could potentially incorporate into data collecting, citizen scientists are not simply free labour. The data collection methods and tools must be very robust to avoid concerns about reliability and the usefulness of the data, particularly when presenting it to authorities and at peer review as well for researchers. So citizen science has a lingering concern about data reliability and data quality, so robust experimental design is really key here. And also as well, following the 10 principles of citizen science to support the citizens, to maintain their interest and manage expectations. So that's another big part of recruiting citizen scientists, is how you can get them passionate about your project, how you can retain their interest so that they can keep collecting data for you. And that involves actually having outcomes for the volunteers as well. So that can be a range of things. Yeah, making sure that it's a co-developed project, everyone understands what they're doing, and that can overcome the problems with data reliability. Another big criticism of citizen science data is that it's a bit spatially and temporally variable, or it can be. Volunteers often collect data in the location that they're passionate about, whereas us as scientists might have interest in other locations. So trying to reconcile the data that people are willing to collect with scientific outcomes as well. So yes, there are some challenges, but they're not insurmountable.
Yeah, and the challenges will change over time as well. So
as will people's motivations for participating as well. So it is very much a process of co-development, co-design, and making sure everyone knows where they are and where they're going.
Yeah. So in this current time of lockdown, there could be a whole huge set of risks with people trying to do citizen science. So, perhaps at the moment we should just be talking about it or doing things that you can safely do sat at home. Whereas in the future, hopefully, people might be able to go out, take photos of rivers, collect other environmental data, etc.
We have just had a follow-on question, Natalie. How to tackle wrong and improper data collection in citizen science research. And I think you've touched on that, but that was always a big question that people ask about the validity of the data, and how do you know it's correct? How do you know you should include it? You've got any tips on that?
Yes, I mean, it slightly depends on your question and what tools you're already using. And these are something that, as there's obviously interest, we can definitely cover in more detail in a later webinar. But it's all about making sure that everybody knows exactly what they're doing, that the methodology that you develop is repeatable, and that you keep checking in with your citizen scientists. You have feedback sessions, you have ongoing training sessions to make sure that they are still following the procedures that you set out for them.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And it's great to see some of the challenging questions that are starting to come through. Samita, we'll come back to your question in one moment. I just want to bring Sarah in for a moment. So Sarah, you're the only one in our team actually based in a university, although we're all actively engaged in research, but and you're also the lead for this project. So, you know, how do you think researchers and others need to adapt to bring citizen science on board more and to make it more powerful?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of two elements of this. I think the first is for researchers to really see the value in that bottom-up approach in driving forward research, and the value of having those first-hand community insights and perspectives in order to shape your research as well. But equally, I think it's also how the science can be translated into other useful knowledge resources that can be shared and used independently by communities within their own environment to kind of support them to drive forward action and change. And this kind of links to a lot of kind of grants that we're seeing at the moment. There's this idea that we need to have an action strategy in place. You can't just expect to go somewhere, undertake your research and then leave. And I think citizen science offers that opportunity and that perfect kind of mechanism to build in that exit strategy so that you can kind of build capacity.
Okay, fantastic. And I guess that sort of links, there's a connection into the question that Samita has asked, which is how do you ensure that proper citizen representation is included in the project in terms of addressing the problems and views? You know, so if you were setting out on a new research project, how would you make sure you got the right citizens involved, Sarah?
That's a very good question. I guess you need to have an understanding of the communities around the site that you're interested in. So again, you can't just expect to undertake research in an area that you don't really know, especially if you're trying to engage citizens as well. So I guess one thing that you can think about doing is holding kind of stakeholder workshops before you begin your research, so you can get an understanding of what the communities are like, what they're interested in, and you can make sure that you're including all of those viewpoints. Also thinking about different ways of engaging citizens as well. Some citizens might not be that happy to kind of talk out loud. So thinking of alternative strategies of, you know, connecting with citizens so that all of their voices can be heard.
Did you want to add something, Natalie? I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I would say as well, it can be challenging. Certainly we find that in London, we have certain areas where there are quite transient communities that are potentially only there for a short amount of time, or they feel that it's the authorities' job to do something, it's not their problem. So reaching out to these people can be very, very challenging, and it can be a very long process to building trust in the community. And as Sarah was saying, there are multiple ways of doing it. It usually involves going to them, holding workshops, holding stakeholder events, putting up posters in local areas, actually going into those communities. And in order to gain trust, it's usually helpful to have a trusted authority or a government organisation or somebody that people know and trust with you. So if you're very new to it, try and get a good partner on board to help build that trust.
Fantastic, thank you. And you know, we don't want to spoil future webinars, but a lot of this will be covered in more detail later on, and questions that people are asking now will help us to make sure that we target the content in the future. So, I mean, on that community engagement, it then you start to move into thinking about how you manage stakeholders and how you reach out. And Paula and others on this call, we're passionate about how we can bring businesses into this, and businesses are keen on engaging their stakeholders. So you can start to build a map of who could or should be engaged in any activity in any location, and different people will have influence over different communities. And we could spread this webinar out for another 3 hours talking about how to get the right stakeholders involved. It's really important. We need to all learn how to do that better. So just looking at another question. So Raj has asked a question here. It's only gone to the panelists, so I will read it out. So, the rivers of South Asia has common origin, i.e. the Himalayas, and share common tributaries and catchment areas. As water pollution problems are transboundary, I believe joint strategies are imperative for sustainable water quality management. So in this regard, how can a citizen scientist and environmental scientist from other countries of South Asia collaborate and engage in this project? So take a breath. Any of my colleagues want to say anything on that?
I'll just say that that's a very, very good point. And in some ways, citizen scientists are at an advantage because they're not constrained by politics or their local government or their local agencies' operating areas to the same extent. So a grassroots up approach where communities get together and actually drive that collaboration can then promote governments and other organisations sort of falling into line behind them. So it's definitely challenging. I don't think there are any simple answers, but that is somewhere where citizen science can actually be really effective.
And yes, and so on those transboundary issues, if we can use water as a positive reason to collaborate rather than a negative thing, then that will be good for everyone, and it could improve other transboundary relationships on other topics. So it's definitely something that we'd be keen to support. Clearly, the Mula Muta River in Pune is not a transboundary river, but we're keen to think about wider collaborations throughout. So I don't think there are any more questions in the chat. As I say, this is very much a starter, a taster. Hopefully, the attendees who've been on this call have got value from it. As I said, we've been recording it, so we'll be able to share it to others. But I think I'm going to move on to the final slide now and highlight what happens next. So you'll see we're all getting familiar with our roles and how to use the technology throughout this as well. We're all learning. Our next webinar will be a week today, the 7th of May at 9 AM UK time. We've already got the content for that, but we're still keen to bring other people in. So that webinar will largely be delivered by Sarah, Natalie and Sarab, who's not on the call. I will be hosting the call again. If you've got ideas for content for that webinar or for future ones, then please do email Leslie, and her email address is there. But we'd also welcome your feedback on this webinar and on the whole series. So there's a link there to an online survey, or you can use your smartphone at the QR code there and it'll take you directly there. We'll also email everyone at the end of this call within the next hour or so with a link to the survey, a link to the slides, and with the webinar recording so that you can share it with colleagues or go back to any bits that you found were particularly interesting. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and I will go back to the session plan just so that everyone can see the future webinars. So as we say there, 7th of May, the value of citizen science in research. 14th of May, the value of river research and citizen science to businesses. skipping a week then, the 28th of May, developing a citizen science project. Week later, using and developing free tools and apps. So that's not just online tools, web tools or apps. There's all sorts of different tools that could be used. And then finishing off on the 11th of June with our idea building workshop. So lots to look forward to, and hopefully, you know, people will be able to find the time to join some or all of those webinars. So any final questions, comments in the chat or from my fellow panelists? No. Paula, did you want to say anything?
I was just typing thank you everyone into the chat to say thanks to everybody for attending, and we really look forward to seeing you next time. That was all.
Yeah, fantastic. So please do the feedback. If you thought this is brilliant, that will help us. If you thought it's been rubbish or we could improve, that will really help us. So yes, please do fill in the chat, fill in the survey. Thank you very much, everyone. And I will close the webinar in a moment then, as soon as I can find the button. But thank you, everyone. Take care and stay safe.